Greetings, guys. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Monette, and this is my channel, Evolve with Monette. So good to share some energy with you today. For those of you that are new here, I'm a professional intuitive empath, and I want to talk to you about the birth of an empath, why it's not glamorous, and why we may need to do some work in adjusting our superpower that so many people claim to want, but they don't really realize what it is born of. An empath is born, usually 99% of empaths are created by having to read the vibes and the frequencies in the room. And usually that comes from a very toxic, abusive, or narcissistic parent. So one of our first memories is figuring out who the craziest, most hurtful, most abusive person is, who's the loneliest, who's the most downtrodden, who's the sickest, who's the most mentally unwell, who's the most mentally unstable. The reason we're identifying them isn't because it's delightful for us and we want to go dancing with them. It's because we're trying to protect ourselves. They say survival of the fittest is what we do as humans, and it's the truth. In order to stay alive in those situations, we must identify who could be dangerous to us and who could take us off our path, who could cause our lives to end. Dealing with a narcissistic father myself, being a very small child, I did a lot of things to protect myself, literally, as I grew and grew and grew, because abuses were heaped upon me, because I would identify the lowest frequency as I went through many other areas of my life. Trigger warning for anybody who's ever dealt with SA, you know what that is, it's YouTube, I can't say. You will notice that if you've ever dealt with SA of any kind, that you have maybe been abused several times in your life by several people, and you think, what must be wrong with me? What is going on with you? As you are identifying the lowest frequency. That doesn't mean you chose it, selected it, wanted it, or invited it. Not at all. It means that people targeted you because they could see, and you could see in them too, with that magical empath energy, that they were sick, depraved, or were someone who had a propensity to be abusive in that certain kind of way. So that's why people that have been victims of trauma and abuse have had it happen in multiple relationships and multiple times, whether it's SA, domestic, whether it's mental, emotional, or you name it, right? And it's because we identify that. So I remember paying attention to my father because he was absolutely unhinged and unpredictable. He could also be charming and lovely. I describe him very much as Jack Nicholas from The Shining. Yeah. um, it was crazy. It was 1 minute charming and charismatic, the next minute dangerous. And he was throwing babies, injuring women and children, punching and shooting at and doing various things that you wouldn't even imagine, choking, slapping, all kinds of things that were never relegated to just a human that was of his size or a man. It was always to the women and the children that would be the product of that kind of demise. So I assess that. I have a picture that I keep in my ancestor altar to remind me, and it's of me with a stethoscope as a child, a play stethoscope up to him, trying to listen in, and he's staring off blankly into the distance, and that is the personification of our relationship. While my father had many, many children, because Papa was in fact a Rolling Stone, I was the one who honed in on his illness and tried to please him and or avoid him and or try to make him happy. A lot of my empath tendencies were born in the fire of his disease. I was purged in that fire. So the people pleasing tendencies, winning contests, making the bed the best, trying to make sure I was better than my siblings, better than the rest, trying to make sure that I was the one who stood out, even if it was never going to get me clout with him. I did it. A lot of those things I carried on in other toxic relationships. Also, making myself small when I could tell that he needed to feel tall and he needed to be the largest person in the room. I would read his energy before his fire could consume me so that I could stay alive and stay safe. A lot of us empaths exist in the same way. I want you to think about your parental person, even if they weren't a parent, maybe a parental figure, if they weren't actually a blood relative, who you had to figure that out. I remember being attracted to people as I went through my life. And I remember realizing the moment that I would be drawn to them. One person in particular who I touted as the loneliest person in the room, the loneliest girl in the room. And even though she approached me later, as narcissists often will approach you and begin a relationship with you because they can tell that you have this wound too, I remember identifying her before she approached me, and being incredibly attracted to her and wanting to fix her, wanting to heal that sadness in her, thinking that I could. I had that happen with multiple relationships that didn't end up good. Some of them weren't as bad as others, but it's because of that place where that wound was formed. In order to survive from the day I was born, I had to figure out who was the lowest in the room, who was a person that could consume me, and I had to protect myself or become an asset to them to earn my survival and earn my keep. We know that that's not true. As we grow and as we listen to fantastic therapists and doctors here, that we are all privileged to know for free. Can you imagine the cornucopia of information that's available to any empath or person who has had a narcissistic dealing and has caused narcissistic injury to a narcissist or has had injury dealt to them from a narcissist? We are blessed in this life, but we grew up, a lot of us, as 80s, 70s, and 60s babies that had no idea about what we were dealing with. We just knew he drank too much, or they used drugs, or they didn't drink at all, but rage was their addiction. We didn't understand their affliction, but we understood that we needed protection, and we did that by identifying where they were. My father's accent was heavy, it was thick, sometimes so thick that it could sound like he was speaking Spanish, and yet he would still bark orders. And as a child who spoke the King's English very well, from my father, who was illiterate to the day that he died, even though he was a businessman that was incredibly successful, that hired CPAs and accountants, a la Richard Branson and others that say you don't necessarily need to know how to do everything, you just know how to delegate. He did that greatly, I will say, but he was illiterate, could just barely sign his name. And so when he spoke, though he had brilliant words and all of the best curse words, I will say, I learned how to curse someone out properly from listening to my father. What I will tell you is that I didn't always understand his speech, and that could present as trouble for me. So if he was barking in order, if he was telling me to go get him some water after a long day of him being in the sun, or if he was telling me not to touch this or not to sit on that, or whatever thing that he wanted to bark at me, I literally became so good at what I do because I had to dive deep into my empathy immediately. I didn't even understand his language sometimes. He is a West Indian man with a Catition accent, St. Kitts, and it was very, 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 very heavy, very strong. And so it took me a long time. I was like 8, 9, 10 years old before I started to really understand his speech pattern and pick up the language. And it wasn't like Spanish to me. So for the first few years of my life around him, I would get beatings if I didn't intuit properly what his gruntings and yellings and meanings meant. You guys get it? That's how an empath is born. I had to figure out what this grown man wanted from me. Otherwise, I would be punished brutally for it. This is how a lot of us came up, not maybe with my scenario or situation. So I dealt with that by protecting myself in actual body incubation from other abusers and from abusers like him too. Maybe some of you can relate. Maybe something similar has been part of you or has happened to you, but that's how we are born. Everybody today wants to be an empath. They think it's so magical. It's really horrible. It starts off terrible. It starts off with heaping neglect. It starts off with someone who's consistently vexed. It starts off with someone who's threatened by your light. It starts off with someone who doesn't want you to be bright. It starts off with someone tamping down your light. It starts off with someone ignoring your needs and invalidating you. It starts off with you not ever getting to say words that are true about what you feel and what doesn't feel good to you. That's what the origins of an empath are. So the reason people are like, well, how do you know this? How are you so good at this? Well, I don't go into all that with every client, though. If you're a client here and I've worked with you, now you understand, but you have for a while because you've been here and you've been sticking beside me, and I appreciate it. But a lot of you can relate to this too. We are formed in the fires of absentia. We are formed under neglect. And those relationships that we get into later will be of the same ilk and cause us to similarly genuflect. And genuflect means to bend a knee to the person that is abusing we. When I finally cleared it up, there were pieces of my father in various of the narcissists that I was friends with quote unquote friends, or that befriended me, or hoovered me, or hunted me more appropriately. There were pieces of them. And I remember talking to one narcissist many years ago and saying that she would say, because she wanted to dismantle my beginning origins of understanding the connection, she would say, "It's so creepy how you always talk about your father. It's so creepy," because I was just starting to talk about him. I didn't talk about that man for many, many years. But we came into a time of existence in our connection and the evolution of that, where I started to put together the dots. I started to put together the past fears and the triggers. And while she wasn't exactly like him, she did have a component, as many of the narcissistic relationships will mimic, that we go through. And I realized that she was reminding me of him in certain ways, and she would try to discredit me. It's so creepy. But the truth is, she had father issues for days, and she acted it out with every man that she dealt with. Even though she was a narcissist, she was incredibly toxic. I would consider her, to give you guys a clear, quick picture, she was the black version of Amber Heard. I didn't understand that till all these years later, that now we know Amber Heard exists and we can watch the trial and see the way that that was a dumpster fire. Not to say Johnny is innocent, because he's not. But what I will say is that histrionic, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a B word. It's not bipolar. I don't know that she was bipolar. She was definitely histrionic. And there's another word. But anyway, it's one of the first times that I saw that type of narcissism present itself, and the purposeful arguments and the attachment disorder. I watched it from a more anthropological and psychological perspective as I observed her relationships with men. I was just brave enough to say I'm understanding the connection with the guy in my life, which was my father, and how things weren't right and how this was similar. And while she didn't have huge chunks, it was enough for me to start to wake up. And that's what will happen in our journey. Now, years later, you guys have heard me talk about a covert narcissist who, in so many ways, mimicked my dad that it freaked me out. And my father, believe it or not, who has crossed over, came through to help me free myself, because he says, "Do you not see me in her? This is me and you. Do you not get what's happening here?" Because listen, as narcissistic as he was, I won't say he was kumbaya on the other side. He came through kicking ass and taking names the same way he liked to ride in this life. But I think some evolution has happened for him on the other side. Who are we to say? Because he came in dreamscapes, and he came in actual synchronicities, and he said, "This is me, and you will break free, and you will not do this. And I am sorry that I did this to you, because you're taking this bullshit behavior because you think that this is a love that's true, when in fact it's only ever been negligence and abuse." It was powerful. Not all of us get that. And when someone does, then you need to run tell that to the collective and say, "Hey, hey, hey, you may not have your person have crossed over. Maybe your parents are still here today. But if you found yourself in a relationship with a friend, a lover, a partner, a boyski, a broski, a boyfriend, or whatever, and they had similarities to this parental figure, then you may be reliving something. You may not get the closure that I got. I've been so lucky that I have gotten such beautiful closure, even from that narcissistic father who said, "Yeah, you're dealing with someone who is exactly me. And in this way, you get to break the generational curses." As I was vacationing and doing all of that stuff, we had a lot of deep conversations, because that's just the way I roll. And we were talking about generational curses and how you can identify it. Maybe another video to be made. And the generational curses that each one of us at the table may have wanted to break or may have thought we have broken. But specifically in the last incarnation with that covert narcissist and the father similarity, I broke the generational curse of third party, which was something that was heaped upon my family lineage, the women in my family, each one of them turning their head the other way, as the men in their life did like to play, and they had to stay there because of financial reasons or whatever, because that was the life they were in, because of the antiquated system they were in, because of the time frame. And they couldn't do what I did. And even though my situation was unconventional and it was not as in my face as it was for my parent and her parent and etc., etc., I still had to see through the dark. That empath gift that was not so glamorous helped me spot the lark. It helped me pull out the ruse. It helped me to no longer be confused. All those years in my formative time of figuring out my father's views when I didn't speak his language, of avoiding his heavy fists as they would slam across my face because I sung a song in a happy, childlike way, I learned discernment. And I never had to put it to the test more than when I escaped the clutches of a malignant, covert narcissist. Can you be all of those things? Histrionic, yes. The white Amber Heard that I dealt with, who'd had to deal with their own white Amber Heard. So it was an interesting test for me. Full circle, 360 degrees. I had to speak a different language to not end up bloodied and on my knees because of my father, and to energetically not end up bloody and on my knees because of this covert narcissist and her lying fodder. I had to use the same skill set that kept me alive when I was 3, 4, and 5. Message. You may have to do the same too to break free and to break the general curses, the generational curses that are upon you. Nothing was clear for me to see. And my angel said to me, do you remember when you learned how to speak your father's language when you were but 3, 4, and 5? And that is what kept you alive. That's what helped you to run left if he was running right. That's how come when he would chase after you and it was with a knife and you would run and round and round the island. You did it so many times and we did it so that you could exhaust him. And we were talking to you even then because we were always standing by your side. We were always your friend. Well, in this same dark night of the soul, when you felt like this covert narcissist had full control, we started to whisper to you about the gift you have as an empath to understand things you can't see, to hear the things you can't hear, to know the things that are unknown, to speak into your darkest fears. And we save you. We get you out of it. And it's not just us that saves you, it's you that saves you because you learn how to speak a quiet, unspoken language. And you did that by being attracted to the lowest vibration in the room. And you did that by learning how to tune in. Empath, the same is true for you. I'm so proud of you if you're here tonight and you're listening because you heard the voice of truth and you escaped and you didn't do it and it wasn't just easy, but it came born from times when you were 3, when you were young, and when you were weak, and when you had no control over the words people did speak and the actions they did take over your personhood and body. Maybe someone in your life as an adult didn't do exactly what someone else did when you were that vulnerable and that young, but you were triggered just like when you were a kid because there was evil that was being done and you felt it. You didn't see it, you didn't hear it, you perceived it. That's our gift. And it's never glamorous. Think twice before you laud this empath life. Think twice before you want to be woken in the night with dreams and premonitions. It is the way we survive this incredibly toxic world we have been dropped in. It's not all pain and it's not all backwards progress. It is definitely learning and becoming our best. The best parts of us are when we escape the people that are abusive, when we escape our own patterns, when we break generational curses, when we don't look back, when we give thanks to the fact that maybe we were even born and chose to incarnate into a life filled with narcissists. Because, yes, it is there where we sharpen and honed our greatest gift. But I say it to you again, my sweet empath and earth angel, there is nothing about it that's glamorous. Have humility in your gift. Know it is there to protect you and to protect others. But I wouldn't wish what we do on my worst enemy. Because in order for us to carry this weight, the price we pay is incredibly great. and it is a tax that we pay throughout our entire lifetimes through relationships that we weave in and out of that often show us no love until finally it all clicks and we set ourselves free. We break out of the generational curses, and we do so with glee to go on and find happiness. Actually, you deserve it. You are worth it, and you are perceptive. You have earned it. You did not deserve what happened to you then, when those parents or those molesters or those faux friends. You did not deserve the pain that you endured, only to later be able to cure pain in others. Heavy is the head. People hear me say that and they think this girl's so conceited. The crown we wear is similar to what we saw replicated with the Lord and Savior Jesus. It's a crown of thorns. It's not just glamorous rubies, it's not just emeralds that we're adorned with. It is painful, cutting memories that pierce our skin, that slice through our epidermis, that work their way in and travel through our bodies, blood borne pathogens, diseases, energetic diseases that we've carried and that we've transmuted and that we've cleaned. It is not an easy thing. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. Stand erect, empath, because you've held it down and you have worn that crown as the blood dripped down your face, as many people in your life laughed and looked on you with disgrace. She's so weak. She people pleases. She's often on her knees. She makes things so easy for everyone. What a doormat. What a person with no backbone. Little do they know you were E.T. just trying to find your way home, and home was your true north to the place of your actual worth. You are a survivor. You got it out the dirt. It's easy for them to opine about your weakness because their strength and your strength they could never fathom. It's easy to abuse us empaths when we don't know who we are. But once we come this far and we step into our power and we realize the regality that comes with wearing that throne, that our back straightens, the doormats rolled up. There is nothing but goodness overflowing our cup, no more the blood, tears, and bitterness for the years of pain that now have turned into progress. Now, like dust, we rise. They could trot us down in history, as Maya says, with their bitter, twisted lies. They could stamp us in the very dirt, but still, like air, we rise. And we rise because through childlike eyes, we looked around the room and we saw the spooks and the spies, and we knew the devils that were in disguise. And we knew it because we had to, because we chose to survive. Do not rue the day of your weaker ways. Do not rue the day of your people pleasing. Do not rue the day when you slipped through rooms so those devils could not get a piece of you. You are powerful. You are cunning. You are bright. You are walking embodiments of the light. You were born in the fires of wrath and rejection, and you come out shining. You are earth angels. You are divine feminines. You are empaths and intuitives. And your gift is great. It is never, ever, ever too late to stand in the truth that has been with you since your youth. What you gravitated to is what you now transmute. It's the lowest frequencies. It's the hateful energies. It's the people that don't wish you well. It's the people that damned you to hell, and not one of their arrows or slingshots can pierce you. You are ferocious. You have come through the fire, the gauntlet. You stand taller, you stand higher, and behind you, Metatron, the angel they say is taller than the earth if you needed a visual. You can feel you before they see you. You have King Kong in the trunk. That's your angels and ancestors standing behind you. Maybe the very same ones that initially burned you as they work through their own evolution. And now they sing praises to you and wrap rings of protection around you. If no one has told you that they love you today, then allow me to send this love your way. I am so bloody proud of you for the things that you've gone through, and still you stand with a smile on your face, with the sun radiating from you, offering goodness and grace to those who are worthy of you and who respect you, for those who put some respect on your name. No longer are you just a rat running through the game. I am proud of you, Empath. The narcissist did not drive you insane. And so it is. So good sharing energy with you. Come back and join me next time, and we will continue to evolve together.